Director Nevitt, what do we have next on the old agenda?
All right, next up, we are going to move to our budget and audit committee items. We have up for approval the FY25 budget, as well as some decision making around our reserve allocations. So I'll turn it over to Treasurer Adewale.
Thank you, Edinelli. Thank you, Edinelli. The Board of Governors have had opportunity to look at this budget 3, 4, 5 times. This is the final reading and action item today. We're just going to, Director Lynch is just going to go over a couple of slides with you, and then we are open to any questions and to vote as soon as possible. Thank you. All right, Director Lynch, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Treasurer Adewale. The budget materials begin on page 31. So walking through the changes from the last draft to this final one, the Budget and Audit Committee unanimously approved the final draft that's presented to you all to be brought forward at their August 9th meeting. The major changes from the first draft, which you all saw in July, to this one, the biggest is that we added the section budgets to it. So big changes to revenue and expense are related to adding all 29 section budgets to the final draft. In terms of the final draft, we're looking at a total use of reserves of about 1.5 million, but that's across all of the funds. So we'll walk through each of the funds and the major changes. Indirect expenses, which is staffing costs and overhead, impact all of our funds. Directly, it impacts the CLE, General Fund, and Client Protection Fund. In terms of changes from the prior draft, there's 2 main changes. One is related to our project to downsize WSBA's office space. So we are currently in that process. We are going to be starting construction in October. All of the costs related to that were budgeted in the fiscal 2024 budget. So we are rolling forward those expenses. They're not going to be spent in 2024. So we're moving them into 2025. So that includes temporary staffing costs to do scanning of hard copy documents into electronic form. So the cost for that, as well as equipment, furniture, et cetera, that is going to furnish the new space. So all of that is moving forward. The other is related to capital labor. So capital labor is an offset to salary expense. It's a negative amount. It reduces our salary expense. Capital labor is derived from the staff cost related to our IT team and the developers. So when they develop software in-house that we get to then turn into a product that we use over time, becomes an asset for WSBA, and we depreciate the expense over multiple years. I think the last time we met, I talked about the development of the replacement of our association management system or membership database system. It's our system that every single department in our organization uses. We are currently under a process to look at replacing it. So that means we're working with a contractor to identify requirements and really go out to bid to find a replacement. So we started working on that, and between the first draft and the final draft, identified that it's unlikely that we will find a solution that will be an on-premises purchase or software that we would actually have as an asset and depreciate. More likely, we will move towards a software product that's a subscription-based model. That is something that is happening with a lot of our software now. We've already started moving towards that in other areas within the Bar Association. So because of that, we no longer need or will be including that capital labor from our staff. The flip side to that is, while it's increasing our salaries, we also have a reduction in depreciation expense, because by removing that capital labor, we're also removing the depreciation of that capital labor over time. So those 2 things go together. We also had a slight increase in our retirement rate. It went from 9.03% to 9.11% effective the 1st of this month. That was we were just informed of that at the end of July. So equates to about $11,000 to increase in cost from the first draft to the final draft. For the general fund, we're looking at a total final draft use of reserves of about 1.46 million. Of that, 109,000 will be coming from the facilities reserve. The remainder, the 1.35, will be taken from the unrestricted reserves. Major changes here are the indirect costs I just mentioned, as well as a number of direct expenses, which I'll go through in the next slide. So a total of $45,000 in increase from the first draft to the final draft. The list is here and I'll kind of highlight the reasons for each one of them. Court reporters is increased by 24,500. A lot of what we do between the first draft and the final draft is aligning with actual costs year to date. So really having more information and being able to update our numbers is a lot of what we do. With court reporters specifically, the cost is increasing because the rates are higher for hybrid and remote hearings. We also aligned the budget with the number of cases that we expect to go to hearing next year. So the increase by 24,500 is more in alignment with what we're actually spending for 2024. Law library desk book access of $10,000. That's actually just a reallocation from the CLE fund. It was already budgeted in the desk book fund. So net difference for this budget versus the last budget is 0, but we're moving it to the general fund because it benefits all of our members. Disability accommodations for $7,000. This is related to the bar exam. The most recent bar exam, we had a much higher number of requests for accommodations from our applicants. It's a pattern we're starting to see, so increasing the budget to ensure that we do have funds to support that need. Diversity events and projects, $7,000. It's increased to support DEI Council's work to have statewide in-person events as they roll out the DEI plan next year. Staff travel and parking for multiple cost centers there is just to adjust to what we're actually spending in those areas, more alignment with actual cost. Same with staff membership dues. Some of our rates have gone up, and same with depreciation. Again, adjusting our numbers to base on more information that's more accurate. And then finally, the DEI Council increase of $600 is to allow for some minority bar association memberships for our DEI Council. We did have one decrease to the Bar Leaders Summit. You'll remember that this is a new line item for the fiscal 2025 budget. And so we went back and looked at our numbers to determine how we're going to approach putting on the summit and reduced the cost from $45,000 to $35,000. For CLE fund, we're still looking at a budgeted net income and in fact, a higher net income. Main change in this fund from the last draft is just the $10,000 that we moved from for law library desk book access out to the general fund. And then an overall reduction in indirect expenses. Might seem counterintuitive that I just talked about increasing indirect expenses from the last draft from the first draft to this draft. But the reason is because the majority of the indirect expenses that I mentioned are general fund expenses. They're not necessarily for CLE or client protection fund. Where we had savings for depreciation in other areas, those are overhead costs that are spread out to all cost centers, but the staffing costs are within the general fund. So that's why that number is lower. So the CLE fund is projected to add to their reserves for fiscal 2025. Client Protection Fund did not have much change either, about $5,000 change. Again, indirect expenses were lowered, but we also did some looking at their software development related to their database for the Client Protection Fund, and it does attach to our discipline system as well. So that's moving to a subscription model. Therefore, we don't have depreciation expense. So that's the main change there. So overall, this particular fund is also going to continue to increase. It's budgeted to have a net income, so it'll be adding to its reserves for fiscal 25. Section funds is, like I mentioned before, this is the first view that you all have of it. All 29 section budgets are included in the materials. We compared the fiscal 25 budget to the fiscal 24 budget, and it's fairly similar, about $31,000 different. Small reduction in revenue and expenses. And as you can imagine, all of them have very different revenues and expenses. Per member charge is included and is usually one of the larger expenses for every section, and that is the allocation of administrative costs to each of the sections. One section in particular did request an increase of dues this year, the taxation section. So from $20 to $30, and the Budget and Audit Committee unanimously approved that as well. What's included as well in your materials that's new is the capital budget. The funding for it was always included, but just breaking it out for you so you see what we're spending. The reason this is helpful is because capital budget is really your cash outlay in any given year. How it shows up on the financial statements in the budget is a depreciation expense, the fraction of the cost. So it's really helpful for you to know what we're committing to from a capital expenditure perspective. Historically, we have had a fair amount of expenses related to capital labor, but as I mentioned before, we're adjusting the budget. We are moving more towards subscription model. So I don't anticipate that our capital budget will be as large as it has been in the past. The fiscal 24 budget had a capital labor budget or capital budget, excuse me, of $340,000. So it's a $200,000 reduction. Right. With the final budget, we updated our fiscal projections. So on the chart here, we updated our fiscal projections for what the final budget reflects, but we also updated it for where we think we're going to end this year. So this shows you the expected net income or loss in this case for the general fund specifically. And, you know, we've talked about this many times that we outperform our budget and we anticipate we will this again this year. And so the two columns to the right show what will happen or what it would result in if we were to beat our budget by $600,000. So you see the variation between the spend down of our unrestricted reserves and how that impacts, you know, things like setting the 2026 license fees. And then lastly, license fees. The middle column is really helpful. The effective license fee, that is how much it would cost, how much our fee would have to be in order to basically break even, right? So if we didn't account for reserves whatsoever, this is how much we would have to charge to support the operations of the Bar Association and the general fund. As you can see, there are different effective license fees depending upon whether or not we anticipate that we'll outperform budget. So it gives you a bit of a range on the cost there. I think that's all I've got in terms of the budget.
We are open to questions or any need for clarification. As you have, as Director Lynch noted, the only changes to what you have already seen has to do with section. We have not much control over that. So questions, comments, or clarification before I turn it over to President Hajibu and Udinevich. All right, over to you.
So we're looking for a motion to approve.
Yes.
Motion to approve.
I so moved. And Carrie already said.
Okay.
Second. Second by Todd.
Any discussion?
It's already second by Todd.
Thank you.
Good thought.
Okay, if there's no discussion, we'll move to a vote. And again, this is a motion to approve the budget. Christina Larry.
Aye.
Kevin Fay.
Aye.
Parvin Price. Matthew Dresden.
Aye.
Serena Sayani.
Aye.
Allison Whitney.
Aye.
Ari Petrosic.
Aye.
Jordan Couch. Not present. Nam Nguyen.
Aye.
Todd Bloom.
Aye.
Francis Adewale.
Aye.
Brent Williams Ruth. Not present. Mary Rathbone. Mary, are you speaking on mute? Okay, not present. Tom Ahern. All right, motion passes unanimously.
Okay, now the next issue, are we allowed to continue?
Yes.
The next issue has to do with the reserve, and we have, thank you. At the Budget and Audit meeting, we also proposed some recommendations on general fund reserve, and Director Lynch would is available to answer any questions. Do you have any comments?
No, I don't have.
131.
Yes, page 131 is the recommendations. There are 4 action items for you all related to reserves. Would you like me to go over them really
I think we
briefly?
should go
Okay,
over them.
great. So the first 2 are related. They're the facilities reserve fund. So the facilities reserve fund started at $2.7 million at the beginning of the year. In the middle of the year, the board approved use of $400,000 of that fund to put towards the downsizing project. So the available balance is $2.3 million. The Facilities Advisory Subcommittee of the Budget and Audit Committee met and reviewed the balance as a part of their role and made a recommendation to the committee to liquidate that fund. So in the memo, it describes sort of the process that we went through, the information that we took into account when making that decision, given also the history of the Facilities Reserve Fund, which tends to ebb and flow with our space lease. So we just executed our new lease for another 10 years and 7 months. And so it's normal for us to, sort of release funds and then build back up for the next lease or space decision. So the request here, or the action item here, is to approve the reallocation of the available amount of $2.3 million from the facilities reserve into the unrestricted reserve fund. And if you approve that, it also requires that we make some amendments to the fiscal policy. In the fiscal policy, it specifically outlines a minimum balance of the facilities reserve of $1 million. So we'll strike that language. And we also have some cleanup to do related to reference to the December 2026 lease completion. So the red line is on page 133.
And I want to remind our members that might be present that issue came up before the budget and audit in August, and it was unanimously approved after a lot of questions and comments were taken.
Should we take each one of them
Yeah,
voting?
let's take.
Yes.
Motion. The motion from budget and audit is to approve the facility. Let me read it correct. Budget and audit approve the recommendation to transfer the remaining balance of 2.3 million from the facility reserve to unrestricted reserves. And with a red line fiscal policies revisions as outlined in here. Coming from the committee. So
Is that a motion? So second.
Okay.
All right, any discussion? Does anyone need the motion clarified? Okay, so the motion is to approve the recommendation from the Budget and Audit Committee to transfer $2.3 million from the Facilities Reserve to Unrestricted Reserve, along with revisions to the Facilities Reserve fiscal policies. All right, we'll proceed to the vote.
Yeah.
Oh, was there a question?
Oh, Todd.
So we were de-obligating approximately 2.3 million. It's the balance though, right? It's the full amount, not just, so there wouldn't be any residual left in that, right?
There is currently, that would leave less than 400,000 that was designated for the WISPA downsizing project. So as we spend it down, that's what's available. So if we don't spend all of it, that's what will remain in the balance.
Okay. And to be clear, the reserve is still going to be in name only available.
So my other question relates to the operating reserve fund. Unrestricted reserve can be used for any purpose, as I understand, right?
Yep.
Including operations?
Yep.
So is there a necessity of designating an operating reserve fund if unrestricted fund reserve can be used for operations? It just, I mean, just
Yeah.
wonder if there's a purpose behind it.
Yes. Yes. I was gonna say Governor Fay is probably right in line with you. So the operating reserve, we've historically used it to identify as an emergency use reserve. It's there, worst case scenario, it's available. However, all of the funds are able to be reallocated based on the board's decision. So it's board designated. So yes, at any given time, if we were to have an emergency, the board can make the decision to unrestrict and move any of that money. The only thing they can't touch or move is the client protection fund. So yes, I mean, it exists and for a purpose, for a lot of different reasons, to send the message to members that we have the safety net. It also is something that we also reference when our fiscal policy does require that we have at least $2 million in our general fund at any given time. So it's easy to point to the operating reserve as that safety net, right, to meet the policy requirements.
Yeah, that question came up a lot during the V&A. As Governor Page stated, it was. All right, we can go to vote if there is any other, if there's no other comments. Okay.
Moving to a vote on the motion to approve. Christina Larry,
Aye.
Kevin Fay, Parvin Price, Matthew Dresden,
Aye.
Serena Sayani,
Abstain.
Allison Whitney,
Aye.
Kari Petrosik,
Aye.
Jordan Couch, Nam Nguyen,
Aye.
Todd Bloom,
Aye.
Francis Adewale,
Aye.
Mary Rathbone, Tom Ahern. Motion passes with one abstention.
Yeah, let's,
Okay.
we go to the next one.
Great. So the next item is a reallocation of $400,000 from the unrestricted reserves to the Special Projects and Innovation Fund. Currently, there is no balance in that fund. It was established when we revised fiscal policy in September of 2022. The fiscal 25 budget includes a cost center called Regulatory Reform, which estimates the cost of staff time and direct expenses for the Alternative Pathways project. So the idea here is the reserve is meant to fund project-related one-time expenses rather than operating expenses over time. So things like the Alternative Pathways work, as well as the pilot project for entity regulation. These are right projects for funding through this particular reserve. So our recommendation is to allocate $400,000 to it. The budget for 2025 has just under $200,000 allocated for regulatory reform. We're still working on identifying the cost to be reallocated related to the entity pilot project for entity regulation.
So the motion from the Budget and Audit recommendation is to, it was unanimously approved by the Budget and Audit to make a recommendation to the board to establish the Special Project and Innovation Fund at $400,000 with funds to be reallocated from the unrestricted reserves. That's the motion.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All right, we'll proceed to a vote. Christina Larry, Kevin Fay, Parvin Price, Matthew Dresden,
Aye.
Serena Sayani,
Aye.
Allison Whitney,
Aye.
Kari Petrosik,
Aye.
Nam Nguyen,
Aye.
Todd Bloom,
Aye.
Francis Adewale,
Aye.
Mary Rathbone, Tom Ahern. Did I miss anybody? All right, motion passes unanimously.
All right, we go to the next one.
Right, so the final recommendation is to reallocate $500,000 of unrestricted reserves to the operating reserve. So just heard me talk a little bit about the purpose of the operating reserve, but how it is calculated, or the dollar amount that we put in there, is usually tied to how much it's going to on any given month or a certain number of months cover our expenses in the event of an emergency. So the last time we increased the value of the operating reserve was in September of 2022. So we're now 2 years from that time. Costs increase, payroll costs increase. So adding additional funds to this reserve can reflect that change. So that's the approval. That's what's being brought.
So the motion is a recommendation from the Budget and Audit to increase at its meeting in August, unanimously approved, is to increase the operating reserve fund by $500,000 with funds to be reallocated from the unrestricted reserve. That's the motion.
Second.
Okay. Second, thank you.
Any discussion? Okay, On the motion to increase the operating reserve, Christina Larry. Kevin Fay. Harvin Price. Matthew Dresden.
Aye.
Serena Sayani.
Aye.
Allison Whitney.
Aye.
Kari Petrosic.
Aye.
Nam Nguyen.
Aye.
Todd Bloom.
Aye.
Francis Adewale.
Aye.
Mary Rathbone. Tom Ahern. Have I missed anyone? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I want to say a big thank you to all the Budget and Audit Committee members. And I also want to say big thank you to governors who are not on the Budget and Audit Committee, but attends every meeting. You touch my heart, and I really appreciate you asking the tough questions. Your presence in this meeting has made a difference because we are able to have a very good budget because of your service and dedication. Attendance at meetings does make a difference. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Immediate past President Clark.
Thank you so much. All right, so Francis, thank you so much.
Thank you.